Hello everyone, and welcome to the stage guide, for Falcon that is. So I'll keep this relatively simple and start with some basics. First and foremost, Falcon's best stages in general are going to be the following three: Battlefield, Yoshi's Story, and Kalos. I'll briefly go over the reasons for this, and lylat's probably number 4 by the way. So with Battlefield, the large blast zones help Falcon to live longer, which means that you'll be able to get rage more. And often in the matchups where you like Battlefield, you'll be able to get stocks on your opponent earlier than they'll be able to get them on you. And so the big blast zones will just help exacerbate this fact. And then the platforms in particular are incredible for a lot of short hop up air into double jump up air into falling up air into knee combos or down air. And honestly, they just also make it to where even for more standard up air juggles that you might not be able to convert kills off of, at the very least, you'll be able to just get significantly more up airs than you could before. You can do things like full hop up air into double jump up air, land on the top platform into short hop up air, into landing, into another full hop up air, into another up air, and maybe another one while you're falling. You can rack up a lot of damage really, really well using the platforms, and they can make it easier to land against a lot of the characters that you would want to land against anyway. Yoshi's Story, more or less the same thing. The little tilts by the ledges are usually not a good thing for Falcon, but it's compensated for by the fact that the blast zones are small, which is really good against characters that can reliably kill you off stage, because at least this way you can make it to where they're going to be dying earlier too, and not just you. And the walls are fantastic for just wall jump shenanigans in general, and making it to where it's a lot easier for you to do what you want and to just go a lot more ham off stage because you have more resources. So you have more ways to get back, more ways to go after them, and ultimately just more ways of doing everything, which if you're good at reading what your opponent's going to be doing, you'll be able to convert quite well off of it. And the same thing is true to an extent with Kalos League. The reason for this is that Kalos is going to be your best stage against characters that you don't really want a lot of platforms against, because the platforms on Kalos don't necessarily play that much of a part in neutral outside of you wanting to run away or them wanting to run away. This is generally because the platforms extend by the sides a little bit to where you won't be able to maintain center stage going there, but you can use them to extend your combos. It's kind of like how Smashville in Smash 4 was easily Falcon's best stage, because the side platform would drift from side to side, and you'd be able to use it to extend your combos and finish them much closer to the blast zone than you could without them. So for the same reasons, although to a lesser extent, the Kalos platforms enable that as well. Although they don't go as far, they're always there, which is nice in its own way. You can do things like landing up air, a lot of the similar combos I mentioned on Battlefield, except you'll be closer to the blast zone. You'll be able to do things like getting strings into like down throw, up air, neutral air by the blast zones and get kills much earlier that way. And it's just good in the matchups where you don't want platforms, and so instead of going to Battlefield or Yoshi's Story, you go to Kalos. And of course, the things I mentioned earlier with the platform stages that are best for Falcon, they're also true for lylat to an extent, although that one's a bit more situational. Now then, most of the time you're going to be relying when it comes to striking stages, you're mostly going to be striking the stages based on what you're playing against. Because Falcon as a character is pretty versatile in what stages he likes or dislikes, because even the stages he prefers over others, he doesn't necessarily prefer by that much. A good example would be, there are plenty of matchups in where you're actually going to strike Battlefield, for instance, and it's not a big deal because it's not as if the other stages you can go on are so much worse for Falcon that it doesn't make up for the fact that you're taking away from your opponent rather than you having a stage that's slightly better for you. It's not that big of a deal, but it's still worth acknowledging for the purposes of optimizing your own gameplay and realizing what you have at your disposal when they don't get rid of these stages. Of course, assuming they get rid of these stages, you're usually going to be going on Town and City and lylat. Those are probably your second favorite stages after the 3 I mentioned earlier. Town and City for a lot of the same reasons you like Battlefield, and then lylat for a lot of the same reasons you like Yoshi's Story and Kalos. Lylat in particular is probably the closest thing we have to Kalos when it comes to enabling combos because of its blast zones and sides. And the middle platform also helps you a surprisingly large amount for a lot of your combos since they're more horizontally centric in nature. Otherwise, though, like, you're mostly going to be striking against certain kinds of archetypes and certain types of characters. In general, against zoner characters, you're going to want to be getting rid of stages like FD, Kalos, and Town and City because the platform layouts are, if there are any at all, are not particularly conducive to playing much of a part in neutral game. They're mostly going to be used for either camping or they're just not there at all in the case of FD. So because of this, you have significantly less avenues with which to pursue your opponent, which is particularly important against characters like Pac-Man, Duck Hunt, the Belmonts, the Lynx, and really any good zoner character, or Rob. You want more ways that you can run away from their projectiles and get around them. And so against those zoner characters in general, you're going to want to get rid of, say, FD in Town, and then force them to take you to Battlefield, Pokemon Stadium, or Smashville. Against characters that are more aggressive, or more close quarters combat, that's probably the better terminology to use here, you're actually going to want to use stages a little bit differently. Some good examples are against like a lot of the sorties, against Roy, against Fox, other Falcons. You're mostly going to want to focus on the following stages. Like against those characters, you're going to like FD, Smashville, and Pokemon Stadium the most out of your starters, and so you'll get rid of Battlefield and Town, for instance. Notice how the stage list I'm using is not necessarily the one that's going to be common going forward, but the Evo stage list is the exact same stage list as the Frostbite one, but with DSR. So for planning purposes and mapping out a general idea of what you're going to be doing for this in particular, it actually ends up working pretty well. Especially since I imagine a lot of tournaments are going to follow suit, which makes having a game plan for the Evo stage list in particular and things similar to it a good plan moving forward for at least the next several months. So against those characters, you're mostly going to strike like that, and then games 2 and beyond, you're usually going to be getting rid of, funnily enough, Battlefield and then either Yoshi's Story or lylat, depending on what you think they prefer. In general, you actually kind of like Yoshi's Story against a lot of those characters, but if you think that their, say, up air juggles get too much out of it compared to you, like their juggles are able to be gotten out of even just stray neutral hits, and yours you have to get more defined combos out of. Since those characters can have those juggles easier, you'll want to get rid of Battlefield and Yoshi's Story, for instance. Against a lot of characters that are more mid-range fighters, you're going to ban a little bit differently than you do zoners or characters that tend to get much more in your face. It's going to go something like this. In a lot of those matchups, you don't necessarily want too much space because it minimizes your your ability to corner them, but you don't want too little space because from there, it makes it to where they're at their constant mid-range more consistently and regularly than you are. This is going to be mostly used against characters that aren't zoners, but aren't entirely going to be characters that are constantly in your face either. Good examples would be like Mario, would be like Olimar, would be like... You get the idea. Anyone that isn't a zoner or going to be constantly in your face, you're generally going to want to strike Battlefield and FD against, so that you can force one of these 3 stages. Games 2 and beyond, you're usually going to be getting rid of the most extreme stages, so Battlefield and FD, so that you can try and force something more towards the middle in regards of what you're going to be playing on. And then against a lot of these characters, you're generally going to be counterpicking to Smashville or Yoshi's Island Brawl. These are going to be your best stages against those characters in general. Likewise, against zoners I mentioned earlier, your best stages are usually going to be Battlefield, Yoshi's Story, and lylat. more often than not, they're going to be smart and get rid of Battlefield and Yoshi Story, which means you're going to be taking them to lylat. And that should give you a general idea of how to plan a lot of your counterpicking stages, striking and otherwise. But I'd like to add one aside that I consider important, that I'd like all Falcon players to focus on if you haven't already done so in this fashion. So, in a lot of matchups, you're either going to get these stages banned to where you want to take them to lylat, or you're going to ban other stages and then they take you to lylat. So because of this, lylat is in stage lists that allow it, often one of Falcon's most important stages, just because of the regularity with which you find yourself there. So I'd recommend really sitting down with lylat, practicing every facet of it. Mastering your landing up air combos on the side platforms so that you can get other things. Finding little ways to use the tilts in your favor, such as landing with sliding jabs to basically use it as an approach option and things like that. Master finding uses for the central platform and resetting neutral and finding a way around your opponent's moves. And in general, setting up lots of traps that'll lead into corner traps. Just please focus on learning lylat. I know a lot of people are generally uncomfortable with the stage, but for those of you who are specifically comfortable with it, it's a huge ace in your sleeve. Please, I can't stress it enough, learn lylat if you're a Falcon player. Master it, love it. Either way, that should give you guys a general idea of what to do with Falcon stages. If you have any questions, feel free to message me feel free to @ me on Twitter or tune into one of my streams sometime and ask me more questions there. This is just a general starting point. Otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you dropped a like and subscribe on my YouTube. If you're feeling really generous, you could follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/fatalityfalcon. Or if you're feeling really nice, you could follow me on twitch.tv/fatalityfalcon, or maybe even drop a Twitch Prime. Either way, thank you guys so much, and see you later.